2023, CSA Network UK and the Ecological Land Cooperative shared a presentation slot at Groundswell 2023. Both organisations have a mission to help small farming businesses get started. In this presentation, Ollie Rodker of ELC and Ben Raskin of CSA Network UK explain how the two organisations work and how they could help you become a farmer.
Welcome to Bringing Your Land to Life session, held by myself, Ollie Rodker, and Ben, and we're going to introduce ourselves. I am Ollie Rodker. I'm a founder and a director of the Ecological Land Cooperative. I've been working with the ELC for 15 years. Before that, I was very active in various environmental projects, and I got into land use and farming because of my concern about environmental issues, basically, and seeing land use as a key issue around how we were interacting with the planet and with the natural world around us. I'm a paid staff member for ELC. I work on the monitoring of our farms.
Yeah, so I'm Ben Raskin. I work mainly for the Soil Association. My background is in organic growing. I helped set up the community farm near Bristol. And I'm here today really with my chair of the CSA Network hat on. And I'll tell you more about the community supported agriculture network as we go through.
So I wanted to just, give a 1-2 minute preamble to this, and why I think this session is important, and why bringing people back onto the land is important. Because in the context of a wider climate crisis and a nature crisis, which I imagine most people here see that we're in to some degree, in my view, that is necessarily, if it carries on, going to lead to a food crisis, and that necessarily will lead on to a social crisis. So these crises will ramp up. And a key thing that we need to do in re-establishing different ways of working and different frameworks is to get more people back onto the land, and get more people back onto our farms, and get more people back working with nature and producing the things that we need. And in this country in particular, a very sort of industrial, post-industrial country, there's a lot of disconnection from the land. And so this session is about two different models, two different avenues, ways of getting people to be better connected to land and better connected to land production, food production, but also forestry production, fibre production, the other things that we need. So there's a lot of talk about, rewilding, about environmental issues, but for me also we need repeopling. We have to repeople the land alongside all of the other things that we need to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ELC model. We're a social enterprise and a cooperative set up 15 years ago with the aim of trying to create a model that would allow affordable access to land and be able to bring in more people to land, because as I'm sure most of you know, there is a real barrier around land access and the price of land. We develop small residential holdings. We currently have 6 sites across the country with 11 farms on, 7 in development, hopefully more land coming towards us. And we are definitely offering much more affordable access to land than the market will allow. We don't really think that we are properly affordable in a meaningful sense, because you still need, quite a bit of money to get started in your own farming operation. In terms of diversification, what it means is that on one of our sites, mainly we have 3 different farms. They all do a different set of things, hopefully complementing each other and working together. Very simply, our model is that we raise money through investment or capital or grants, loans, fundraising in various ways. We buy their land or receive farms in donation to us. We create and design a little cluster of farms of diverse businesses. We then apply for planning permission, which is a very strenuous and painful process in this country at the moment, to allow those farm businesses to have a residential holding. So we're creating new homes in the countryside with an agricultural tie so that people can live on site. And it's crucial that people live on the site because that allows them to be close to their farm operation and the things that are going on their farm, and respond very quickly to issues. And also in the long run, it obviously brings down the cost if we can create that housing at an affordable level, or a much more affordable level than rural housing is generally in this country at the moment. Having got a planning permission, we then we look for the people, the stewards, the farmers, the tenants, use different words in different contexts, who will take on the farms. There's an application process. We create a management plan that's a broad set of principles that covers all of our management plans, but may have specifics around each individual site. And we then sign the lease or the rental agreement with the people, with the stewards and the farmers, and we monitor them in an ongoing way against that management plan and check really that the basics are that they are not causing any environmental harm, preferably regenerating and improving the environment, that they are continuing with an agricultural livelihood, that they're there resident on the farm, so that the planning condition that we have is not being abused. Otherwise, they're free to get on with their farm business in any way that they choose. We hope that that is a model of affordability. I say hope because, like I just said, although we're massively undercutting a market price of doing this, it's, you know, it's still costing tens of thousands to set up the things that you need for a new farm. We provide some things as ELC. The farmers have to bring other things themselves. Might be water infrastructure, it might be polytunnels, might be sheds and machinery, etc. These are very small scale farms. We're talking in terms of the kinds of farms that are being seen here over this couple of days. You know, these are micro farms. These are market garden size. We're talking 3 to 10 acres. We hope and plan that there will be bigger, more extensive farms and businesses over time, but so far, really for reasons of capital and finance, we've been, you know, at this very small scale, and at that small scale you can make a decent livelihood, you know, with low costs, with low input costs and low expenditure outgoings, but you can survive. Whereas if we had to buy 100 acres and set up a 100-acre farm, we couldn't afford to do that at the market price. Our leases are 150 years, so they're long term, and a crucial issue, and we might come back to this later, is about security. We want to offer security to people, and so that they can invest time and work and their energy in the long run. But we retain a freehold, which means that we have a leverage to make sure that they are abiding by the management plan. So that if they break the management plan, then because we hold the freehold and they hold the leasehold, we can ask for changes, basically, because they're breaking the legal contract. So that's our broad model, and at this point I'll hand over to Ben.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to sort of move on a little bit from the land ownership thing that Ollie's been talking about to talk about a business model, which is the community-supported agriculture, which some of you, I'm sure, know already. The basic concept here is that the farmer and the person eating the food are sharing the risk and reward of producing it. So in a typical model, you know, I as the farmer, I take all the risk, I pay for the seed, I pay to rent the land, I pay for my tractor and my diesel and my labour, and then I hope when the crop comes in that I can sell it. And I hope that there's somebody there that wants to buy it, and I hope that I can sell it for enough that it's covered my cost and a bit more. And, you know, on the other hand, you might be my potential people that are going to eat it, and you're turning up to a shop hoping that there's going to be some food there and that you can afford to buy it. And in a good year, I might make quite a lot of money because the prices are high and I've done well. And in a bad year, I might get nothing and might lose my farm. So the idea of CSA really is to try and share some of that. And there's lots of different models for how that might work. But there are some broad shared sort of approaches around this. So broadly speaking, if, you know, not surprisingly, when people get involved, they tend not to want to use a lot of artificial inputs. So most CSAs are agroecological. Some of them are certified organic, but often not because they're so close to the people eating it. Their members are involved, so they don't need a third-person certification. So they tend to be agroecological. They tend to be quite a viable business model. So there's good cash flow. There's people committed, customers, members are committed to buying it. So you get a lot of sort of loyalty to the business. There's that intrinsic community investment. So there's the money that you're paying for your share, but often there's an investment in time as well, and local businesses then quite often want to come in and support it as well. You know, one example with the community farm where I worked, we had a really bad year in 2012. It was really wet. A lot of our crops failed. We'd only just set up. We would have gone under. If we hadn't been a CSA or a community-owned farm, we would have gone under. But we went out to our members and we said, "Oh, we're in trouble. Look what's happened." And we had £20,000 at the end of a month that basically carried us over. So there's a real resilience there. Most of them then have this sort of very local, direct sales model. Now that's not inevitable, and I think if we talk, once we sort of start to talk about how we feed cities, I think there are opportunities to bring them to places that are a little bit further away. But certainly at the moment, most CSAs are very local and very direct. So the vision of the CSA network is a thriving CSA in every neighbourhood, and you can see, well, you hope you can see, you might not be able to at the back. So in March 2015, we had 33 CSAs in the UK. We now reckon we're somewhere around 200, and that sort of big spike you can see was around COVID, which I think part of that was around, oh my God, where am I going to get my food from? And part of it, which is perhaps a sort of longer going thing, is people want to re-engage with their community. They want to be more connected. I think a lot of us re-evaluated things during COVID, and I think an interest in local food production and community has been one of those things that's happened. There's a whole range of reasons. I could probably talk for half an hour about why CSAs make sense. I'm going to just sort of whiz through a few of them. So there's a health and well-being aspect. The Soil Association did a report on the CSA at the end of the program that they ran 10 years or so ago. And most people in that report reported that their well-being improved from being involved in a CSA. They felt happier. Part of that I think is around community. Part of it is around being on farms. So particularly around those people that came and actively volunteered and took part. Both mental and physical health were improved through that sort of direct involvement with their food production. There's an environmental benefit clearly because the farms are being managed agroecologically. Again, not surprisingly, there's a real community benefit. There's that direct engagement, which benefits both the community and the farmer. I remember one farmer telling me, he had supplied into supermarkets, and then he was doing his own box scheme. He was approached by a group wanting to set up a CSA on his farm, and he was like, "Oh, I don't know. It sounds like oh." And he said, "It's brilliant. I just get all my mates coming, and I've got this whole new community." And whereas he had felt a bit lonely and isolated within his business, suddenly he felt right at the heart of it and really valued and almost celebrated as kind of this food hero. He was the guy that they all relied on. It made a real difference. Again, around the community, there's these volunteering opportunities. So, a lot of CSAs will have a work share where you could work instead of pay for a share, but also, they will often have, at the community farm, we had a squash harvesting day. We planted about an acre of squashes, and it would have taken a long time for it, to go around and pick them up. And we used to get kind of 50 people turning up and throwing squashes all over the field, and it was a lot of fun, as well as getting a job done. And then that, the benefit to the economy of every pound staying within that community rather than, being leached out towards, all of these other supply chains. From a business point of view, as a farmer setting up, there are some real business advantages. I mentioned the resilience of the farming model. There's obviously that direct routes to market, but there's also the cash flow advantage. So if your members are committed, they're paying. Often they'll be paying a weekly or a monthly subscription, and they're paying for a share of the harvest. They're not paying, oh, you haven't got any cucumbers this week, I'm not buying anything. So that you're going to get that income every month, and that really helps you to sort of ride out perhaps some of those bumps if a crop fails, or it's a real advantage to the producer. And we've seen that where CSAs are run well, and like any business, they can be run well or run badly, but where they're run well, they prove to be a really resilient business model. Often CSAs can be set up either by a community group or by a farmer, or sometimes a mixture of both. And you don't have to run your whole business as a CSA. So quite a lot of businesses will have an element of it, that is community supported agriculture, and they might then do some retail or wholesale to balance that out. So you can use it as a way of balancing out your business. And then the other big advantage, which kind of ties in, the reason for this session is around new entrants. Ollie's very clearly outlined why we need more people, and we do need more people. There's a real shortage of trained growers, for instance. There's lots of people with 2 years experience. There's very few people with 5 years experience or 10 years experience who are going to run these new farms. So how do we bring those new people in? Well, actually CSAs potentially are a great way of doing that. You can start, you do the odd squash day, then you go, oh, actually I really enjoy this, I'm going to volunteer once a week. Oh, maybe I can be employed 1 day a week at the CSA. And a lot of CSAs will employ, more than one part-time member of staff. So you're learning on the job, you're getting experience, you're building confidence. And then maybe you set up your own CSA, because at the moment most CSAs are oversubscribed, and so quite often you'll find they spawn sister CSAs down the road, because most CSAs don't want to grow big. Around 120, 150 members is a nice size. You keep that community, but you've got enough financial viability. And then so you're building that capacity and effectively sort of multiplying the number of CSAs. So the way that the CSA network particularly is trying to support those new entrants, we have obviously lots of networking opportunities, we run events, we've got mentoring programs, we've got lots of resources, and then along with people like Land Workers Alliance and ELC, we do quite a lot of policy work, so trying to really lobby government for a supportive framework for new entrants and for these local food supply systems. A couple of just nice pictures, basically a little bit of break from the words, just to show effectively the scale of some of these operations. Then they're small, but they're not tiny. They're pretty productive. You can run a really good, profitable business that can supply a good number of people. This one is Tom the Hut in Perthshire. It's 5 acres. They do a 25-week season box. So not all CSAs will produce for 12 months. Sometimes producing a share in the hungry gap can be a bit tricky, but some do. Some buy in a little bit to support the share. So Tom does veg, fruit, they do eggs, they've got a retail and wholesale business on the side, they do flowers as well, and they've been going for about 8 years. This one is School Farm CSA down in near Totnes. And so a lot of CSAs have a remit to train and to bring new people on. They're also doing things like seed production and wholesale to supplement the business. So there's some really diverse models around there. So that's CSAs. I'm going to hand back over to Ollie.
I'm just going to talk for a couple of slides about some of the benefits. I mean, I think you can see them pretty well from those pictures that Bender showed from those two farms. Tom the Hut in Scotland, well, I just went to that market garden a few weeks ago. It was stunning. For Scotland, anyone who says that we can't grow a range of food and flowers in this country should go up there and have a look at that. It was really inspiring if you're ever in Perthshire near Crieff. Really incredible. So yeah, there's a lot of diversity on these farms. There's a lot of crops, there's a lot of things going on at the same time. And I guess this is where the title of this session about bringing diversity in is, it's a people thing and it's a nature thing. And when you have different crops and different productive systems going on, you bring different kinds of wildlife in, you bring different kinds of pests and predators and pollinators and all sorts of things. And this is the picture on the side of this slide is Greenham Reach in Devon. There's a couple more pictures coming on. This was a site that we took on that was 2 fields of arable. It had brassicas the last few years, 2 fields of pasture. People told us when we bought it that you couldn't grow any food there, the land was so bad. I mean, there's 1 metre deep topsoil there. Some of the site is incredible. And it's because people get down into the detail of the site. They can find the good pieces of land, they can find the microclimates, they can find the potential. That's what you can get when you get people dealing at a small scale level with the land that you just can't do on a bigger scale. And that's not a criticism of bigger scale. We need a lot of food production, but there are some real benefits that come from this kind of diversity. So we have our model is to have multiple businesses on one site. I mean, that's not actually necessary, because if someone popped up after this session and said, oh, I've got 5 acres of my farm, you can have that, and so when they see it, they go, great. or just set up one, that's fine. But there are some benefits that come with having multiple businesses. You get synergies. People can use different products from the businesses. You can share transport, etc. I think it says a little bit more about that on this side. Yeah, I could talk through that. You can probably all read it as well. There's a lot of reasons to have more diversity on a farm and in our land. There are business reasons, there are climate reasons, there are nature reasons, there are skills and community reasons. And because we have a range of businesses on our sites, that usually means that there are different kinds of community elements going on. So one farm might like to work with children and they have school visits coming. Another farm is providing food to local restaurants and pubs and is connected to a local retail and distribution or processing network. And another farm is maybe supplying fruit trees over a much wider area, and so is connected into a sort of network of fruit tree nurseries, like one of our farms is. So that kind of diversity happens on all sorts of different levels, and there's no one blueprint for it. It really depends on the people, what their interests are, what the land is like, what the local economy is like. A big barrier for people in the longer term in farming is isolation. People are working on their own quite often, and over time that can have, you know, social and health issues around it. And one of the great things about having smaller farms together is that there's a lot of solidarity, that people can cry on each other's shoulders when the wind tears down a polytunnel, or they can be pleased about an ecological survey which has shown the return of a rare pollinating insect. And there's meals, there's a lot of practical and also social and emotional benefits that come from working with other people. And some of the things that Ben said that relate to CSAs, you know, obviously apply to having, you know, more farms and more people working closer together.
I think one of the things that really is powerful for me about CSAs, beyond other ways of getting that diversification and stacking on farms, is that you're committed to that community business. So it takes it almost to a deeper level. You know, you're all part of this community endeavor. You know, so, you know, again, I think it's great to have lots of businesses on site where you're sharing stuff and getting those advantages, but you're still within that, you're still running your own businesses. And if something goes wrong, you know, if you're sick for 2 months, then suddenly your business can't run. In the CSA model, there's support from within that. You know, you can go on holiday for 3 weeks and there's other people within the business to support that. So there's some real, you know, that community feeling and support, I think, you know, it sounds fluffy sometimes, but there's actually a real commercial case behind it and a financial case that helps the business. And certainly, you know, I think the climate proof and the biodiversity, those are things that I think, you know, apply to a lot of similar agroecological type business models. But the financial and the pound coming back into that, directly into that community, you know, all of that is staying there. I think that's one of the things that really makes CSA model powerful for me. However, you know, it's not, as with anything, nothing's going to be perfect. You know, there are things you've got to be aware of. You know, in the same way, if you've got different enterprises on the same holding, there might be tensions. You know, when you're closely entwined in a community, you know, that can have its tensions. It's not for everybody. You know, you need to be able to probably compromise more. And one of the interesting things we see with some CSAs, you get a really dynamic, innovative person that sets it up, and then they don't really want to work with anyone else because it was their vision. And that, you know, so that can be tricky. And how do you get those founders to step back but stay part of the community? That's not always easy. You know, ensuring that all of those sort of enterprises, you know, whether it's CSA or others, making sure that they're properly complementary. They don't compete. You know, you don't want 5 salad growers on the same site because you're going to end up, you know, trying to feed the same markets. And there's, you know, there's a lot of things around tenancy models, cooperative models. You know, actually the legal side of it is what ELC does so well. You know, how do you make sure that that really is fair and equitable? And, you know, long-term tenancies are, you know, definitely the best way to get people to properly be valued and take care of the land. But most CSAs, most farmers, you know, are on much shorter tenancies. And, you know, that's the power of the LC model. I think they're really investing long term into their farmers and tenants. So, you know, and there's a question of scale as well. We talked about it a little bit. You know, most of what the LC are doing, most of CSAs, you know, they are micro, small scale. Now that doesn't mean that they can't be a powerful force. It doesn't, you know, if we had a CSA in every neighborhood, you know, if every village had a CSA, you know, that's a lot of food we can producing. Still probably doesn't sort of help Birmingham and London and Manchester necessarily at scale. So, you know, it's not going to be the answer for everybody. We need that diversity of food production still, but it could be a really big part of the solution. And it's not for every farmer. You know, not every farmer wants to have 100 people coming onto their farm every week. You know, so you have to recognise that only a proportion of people might want to do it. But what's interesting, we ran a horticultural apprenticeship scheme at the Soil Association for a number of years, and it was amazing how many of those people that wanted to be growers wanted specifically to work for CSAs. You know, that was their intention. They knew about CSAs, and that's where they wanted to work. They didn't want to, you know, work on their own in a field. They wanted to be part of a community. And, you know, if you're engaged and supported, you're more likely to stay longer, you're more likely to be successful, you're more likely still to be growing, you know, at the age of 50 or 60. And I see quite a lot of older, slightly broken growers. You know, it's hard work, physically hard work. And if you've got to do it all on your own, and you've got to market, and you've got to, you know, that's tough. You know, whereas if you're doing that as part of a group and being supported, you're more likely to survive.
So we're just going to talk about in detail a couple of our examples. One, Green and Reach in Devon, was the first site that we bought in 2009. It took us 4 years to get planning permission on that site. We had to deal with a lot of scepticism and a lot of fear, both from within the council and the planning authorities and local people, that we were a Trojan horse as a house build. We were really just a house building operation, because how could anybody really just want to be setting up small farms? What a ridiculous idea. No one would want to do that. Actually, times have really changed in that 10 years, and we don't really get that. That worry is not there nearly so much. I mean, A, we've proved ourselves that we actually are serious about this, but B, I think people really do understand the need for local food in a way that has actually changed a lot in 10 years. At Green and Reach, there are 3 businesses. One is a veg box and a fruit tree nursery. One is a sort of salad and flowers for local retail shops and restaurants. One is a sort of more farm to fork business growing food for a food business. There are some areas of ecological sensitivity on the site, so we do a particularly extra bit of monitoring there to see that grassland is being looked after, and there are lots of other things going on around those farms. It's 20 acres. They were just bare field, as I said. We put in a track barn and provided the planning permission. The farmers have brought everything else themselves. And now we have gone from a temporary permission, which is what we had to begin with, that we asked for, a temporary permission for 5 years. Having proved ourselves, that has now been turned into a permanent permission, so people are able, finances notwithstanding, they're able to build themselves a permanent home, a much better home than the sort of first round, one that will see them out, hopefully, and that can meet much more the sort of ecological building requirements that we would like, but are very difficult to do within a 5-year temporary permission. That's an overhead view of it, and you can see in the top of the picture is a cluster of the buildings, polytunnels, shed that was put in, and some of the grazing and the market gardening coming down the hill. That's a picture of some of the residents. There's some cooney pigs there, some bees, people with their stock. And here we come to Kaitan and Furze Hill, which happily there is a CSA on the ELC site, so we can talk about that bit of synergy. It's an 18-acre site on Gower in South Wales. Kaitan were an existing CSA that really wanted to expand onto further land. They only had a 5-acre field. They wanted more land. They were very popular. They had a lot of demand. They needed more growing space, and they came to us to see if we could work with them to help them secure some local land that they knew was coming up for sale. That was higher quality land than their current field. And we managed, amazingly really, actually, we managed to do it in the timescales for this piece of land coming onto the market. It was more land than they wanted, so although they were established there immediately because they didn't need a planning permission, they didn't need housing on that site being already established. And then on the remaining land, we've been going through a long planning process for a One Planet development, which is a particularly Welsh bit of policy that allows people to live on land and with a land-based business if they meet certain sustainability criteria. And we've just recently, earlier this year, found out that we've got the first that first OPD permission. It's the first one in the Gower. It's an AONB, an area of outstanding natural beauty, so it's been very difficult to get that there because of the fears around landscape and building new buildings. So, you know, at every stage there are difficulties, and every stage we slowly get over them. Kaitan are a very successful CSA, and I think one of the examples that Ben referred to earlier, where they have actually sort of set off and spawned, if you like, a number of other CSAs and market gardens around Swansea. And that's a picture of their field centre, and then the OPD plot is on the right with the polytunnel.
Yeah, no, it's worth saying as well that Tom at Kaitan also runs courses on CSAs. He's quite a sort of inspirational figure within the CSA movement. So for those of you that are interested in learning more, it's worth doing his courses. So this is just a couple of final case studies before we move on to questions. So Molescroft Farm is in Yorkshire. Really interesting story. Tamara Hall is an incredible woman who, after a sort of head injury, moved back to the farm, couldn't drive, you know, was kind of, again, sort of slightly uncomfortable with owning lots of land and wanting the community to be more involved. Initially started bringing allotments onto the farm, and then sort of got interested in CSAs, did a Nuffield scholarship. I think she said partly because she wanted to go and visit Japan, but which is sort of where CSAs started. But, you know, then brought on, so they've now got this CSA Frith farm on the farm, which, you know, again, supplies into local veggies and stuff. And there's a really nice quote, which she said, we've often done things on the farm without an eye to profit. And then these fields have tended to be profitable. And so it's kind of that idea that, you know, if you do things because you're committed and because you think it's right, often you can make them work and make them profitable. Yeah, I thought that was kind of quite interesting. And then finally, Wakelands, which I'm sure a lot of you will be aware of, a very pioneering agroforestry holding over in Suffolk, Martin and Wolf. You can see it's this sort of little green oasis in the middle of a East Anglian desert. But following Martin Ann's death, they've turned the sort of focus around a little bit, as Ollie was talking about, this sort of stacked enterprise, lots of things going on. The whole system, they're looking at supply chains and growing stuff. It's only 23 hectares, but there's a lot going on. And in particular, there's the Real Veg Wakeland CSA. So they've only begun for a couple of years. They've got now 35 shares, so they're working sort of with bakeries and other businesses. So there's that real synergies on site, and I think a lot of them see the benefits of that. So I think that's it from us. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate you coming.
Thank you.